big news. Everyone's talking about it. Did everyone see it? Did you see Oprah's big interview?
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's interview has sent shockwaves across the Atlantic and
to share stories of alleged racism, royal family feuds, and mental health struggles.
I was as surprised by the bombshell as everybody else.
She's a chameleon. She, changes based on her environment. I think this is the real Meghan Markle.
No subject was off limits. Meghan says that she went into the royal family blindly.
They're clinging onto the royal family. They hate it, but they're clinging onto their titles.
I feel really sorry for the Queen, who does an amazing job. I can understand that they've potentially got the odd problem with their family.
They sat down and they talked to Oprah about their ups and downs.
This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something.
But in the case of the Oprah interview, I think Queen Elizabeth said, look, I want to watch this interview first.
What did she think of it? I think she was appalled, shocked, heartbroken, all those words, because here,
they are making it impossible for the palace, and they have deliberately done that.
They think this is the right time to be going on national television around the world, bleating about what a tough time they've had.
Some headlines say it is the worst crisis the monarchy has faced in decades.
A royal source says the Queen wanted to take some time before issuing any response.
There could be a context to it that we don't know about, and I think the palace want to find out more about that.
Without knowing exactly what the conversations were and having both sides of this, we have only had one side.
Curious, I'm sure as many of you are, to hear what the response will be.
Where do they start, really? That's the thing. We'll see what they say in their statement.
And then the British public will get to decide who the bad guy is.
There was a moment on the morning of March 8th, 2021, when the most powerful institution in Britain was ready to speak, and couldn't. The statement was drafted. The courtiers were waiting. Senior advisors across multiple royal households had been on calls since before dawn, phones ringing across London while most of Britain was still asleep. The world's press was camped outside palace gates, refreshing inboxes, waiting for Buckingham Palace to say something. Anything. About the most damaging royal interview in a generation. And Queen Elizabeth II said no, not yet. She had one condition. One quiet, non-negotiable condition. And until it was met, the palace would stay silent. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. What Valentine Low uncovered about that Monday, buried in a newly updated edition of his book Courtiers, published in July 2023, rewrites everything most people assumed about how the Queen handled the worst royal crisis of the modern era. Because the silence that baffled journalists, frustrated palace communication staff, and left commentators filling airtime with speculation wasn't weakness. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't the palace machine grinding slowly through layers of bureaucratic caution. It was a deliberate, sovereign decision. Made by a 94-year-old woman who had been reading rooms and reading nations for 7 decades. She was going to watch the interview, and she was going to watch it the same way her people did. On Monday night, on ITV, that choice, quiet, unannounced, entirely consistent with the woman who made it, tells you more about Elizabeth II than almost anything else from that entire episode. And once you understand why she made it, the palace's now famous Recollections May Vary response lands completely differently. The timeline shifts, the silence makes sense, and the Queen, who so many assumed was passive in those 48 hours, comes into sharp focus as the person who was, in fact, directing everything, on her own terms and in her own time. This is what actually happened inside the palace on the day after the Oprah interview aired. To understand the full weight of what the Queen did that Monday, you have to understand what the weeks leading up to it had looked like. The interview had been announced weeks in advance. The palace had known it was coming. What they couldn't know was exactly what Harry and Meghan planned to say. There had been no advance copy provided, no courtesy call, no signal of the specific allegations that were about to be made on American primetime television. The palace had spent those weeks in tense anticipation, preparing for something without knowing its precise shape. The Queen herself had been navigating an already difficult stretch. Prince Philip had been hospitalized at King Edward VII's hospital on February 16, 2021, 3 weeks before the interview aired. He was moved to St. Bartholomew's Hospital on March 1st for a heart procedure. According to royal author Hugo Vickers, Philip's medical team nearly lost him twice during that period. He was 99 years old. The Queen was managing the most consequential family crisis in decades, while her husband of 73 years was fighting for his life in a London hospital. That context matters, because the Queen, who watched the Oprah interview on Monday evening, was not a monarch sitting comfortably with the full resources of her institution arranged around her. She was a 94-year-old woman whose husband was gravely ill, whose grandson had just delivered what amounted to a public indictment of the family she had spent her entire life building and protecting. The interview itself aired in the United States on the evening of March 7th, 2021. 2 hours. Broadcast on CBS. Within the first 30 minutes, it was already clear this was not going to be a manageable news cycle. Harry and Meghan spoke about a royal family member making a comment about the skin color of their unborn child.
Conversation about how dark your baby is going to be?
Meghan described feeling suicidal and said the institution had refused to help her. Harry said his father had stopped taking his calls. He said he felt trapped. He said he feared history repeating itself, and the reference to his mother needed no explanation. The allegations were specific, emotional, delivered directly to camera in front of an estimated 17 million American viewers. By the time the credits rolled in Los Angeles, it was already the early hours of Monday morning in London. A Palace team had watched the entire broadcast overnight. They hadn't slept. They were already on calls before most of Britain had woken up. Valentine Low had unique access to the people inside those rooms. His book, Courtiers, first published in 2022 and updated in July 2023 with a new chapter on the palace's internal reaction, draws on sources with direct first-hand knowledge. Low is not an outsider working from second-hand accounts. He is the journalist who first broke the story of Meghan's bullying allegations against palace staff, a story that originated from insiders who trusted him because of his track record of careful, accurate reporting. The Times extract from his updated Courtiers was picked up immediately by Newsweek. What he recorded about March 8th is among the most detailed first-hand reconstructions of those hours that exist in the public record. And what those accounts reveal is a palace machine operating at full capacity, waiting for one woman to give the signal. By Monday morning, senior officials across multiple royal households were locked in conference calls. The urgency was genuine. The racism allegation alone demanded a response that day. The question wasn't whether to speak, it was how. How direct, how conciliatory. What tone struck the right balance between acknowledging the pain and not validating every claim as settled fact? And most critically, what language would the Queen sanction? A draft statement was ready by 2 p.m. on Monday. The palace said nothing. Journalists tracking the story since Sunday evening were growing visibly frustrated.
It was frustrating for us journalists who always want that immediate reaction.
Broadcasters were running wall-to-wall coverage with nothing new to report. Commentators were filling time with analysis and speculation. And still, silence from the center. Low's reporting explains why. And the reason, once you hear it, is both unexpected and completely in character. One insider told Low directly, quoted in the updated Courtiers, that the late Queen was adamant. She was going to watch the program first, and she was going to watch it with the rest of the population, on ITV, on Monday night. Not from a palace recording, not through a briefing document assembled by courtiers who had already formed their own views. She was going to watch it herself, on the same channel, at the same time.
And we waited till the next day. She wanted to sit down, watch it calmly, and then think what to do.
That was the full explanation for the silence. Not bureaucracy, not paralysis, not a communications team, unable to agree on wording. The Queen hadn't seen the interview, and she had made a specific, deliberate decision about when and how she would. Sit with that, because what it reveals about her is striking. And it cuts directly against the image of an institution caught flat-footed. Every senior courtier in her orbit had already seen it. They had spent the night dissecting every allegation, debating implications, preparing responses. The global media had been in full reaction mode for 12 hours. And the woman at the center of almost every allegation, at the head of the institution Harry and Meghan had described in such precise and damaging terms, hadn't watched a single minute. By choice. She could have watched a private recording at any point from Sunday night onwards. The palace had obtained one. Staff had watched it overnight precisely to get ahead of the crisis. But the Queen declined. She was going to wait for the ITV broadcast. She was going to experience it the way 12 million British viewers would experience it. In real time. Monday evening, not as a private intelligence briefing delivered to a monarch managing a crisis from above, but as a shared national moment. This was not passivity. It was a statement, unannounced, unexplained to anyone outside her immediate circle. It was simply what she decided. And the entire palace apparatus bent around that decision without question. Those closest to her recalled that this was entirely in character. She did not rush to react to events that played out on American schedules. Britain had its own timing. The interview would reach Britain on Monday night. She would receive it when Britain received it. There is a historical echo worth noting. In August 1997, following Princess Diana's death, the Queen remained at Balmoral while public grief mounted in London. She was criticized heavily for appearing remote, for not returning to the capital, for not speaking. Those who knew her well said the same thing then as those close to her said in March 2021. She did not perform reaction. She processed privately and completely, and then she acted with precision. The address she gave about Diana, when it finally came, was considered one of the most carefully calibrated statements of her reign.
I share in your determination to cherish her memory.
Not because it was warm exactly, but because it was measured, and it was completely hers. The same instinct governed March 2021. Wait, watch fully, understand what the country has seen, then speak. Monday evening, the ITV broadcast reached Britain. More than 12 million people watched, and somewhere private, in a sitting room without staff commentary in her ear. So did Elizabeth II. What followed moved quickly. By the time the palace statement was finalized and released on Tuesday, the draft sitting since Monday afternoon had changed. Something had been added. 4 words that would become the most debated phrase in modern royal history. Recollections may vary. Low's account of how that phrase entered the final statement is one of the most revealing sequences in Courtiers. The person who fought hardest to keep it in was not a senior communications official or longtime palace insider. It was Kate, the then Duchess of Cambridge. At least 2 senior officials from different royal households had argued against including it. Their concern was practical. In a crisis already inflamed, language that directly challenged Harry and Meghan's recollections risked escalating rather than containing. The preferred approach from some quarters was something conciliatory. Acknowledge the hurt, express care, close the door without confrontation. But once the phrase appeared in the revised draft, the debate inside the palace sharpened, and Low's sources are specific about what happened next. Kate held the line. Her argument, as recorded by Low, was precise and historically minded. History would judge this statement. Not this week, and in 20 years. In 50 years, when people looked back at how the palace had responded to the most serious allegations made against the royal family in living memory. If the palace absorbed everything without qualification, if there was no signal that the institution disputed any part of what had been alleged, then the Sussex account would stand as the permanent record, unchallenged, accepted by default. The phrase stayed. The statement went out on Tuesday morning, brief enough to avoid escalation, pointed enough to signal the palace was not capitulating. The world noticed the phrase immediately. Harry and Meghan's response was pointed and brief. The story continued for months, and in many ways continues still. But what had happened in those 48 hours was something more considered than the outside world understood at the time. The Queen had watched the interview at the same time as her country. She had not been shielded from its full force. She had sat through it, the racism allegation, the claims about mental health, the words about Charles, the words about William. the same way 12 million ordinary British people had. And then she had sanctioned a response, firm enough to register disagreement, measured enough to avoid a war, personal enough, the whole family, to acknowledge that this was about people she loved, not just an institution she administered. Whether her decision to watch with Britain directly shaped those specific words, we cannot know with certainty. What those who understood her believed was that it shaped her entire orientation toward the response. She had experienced the crisis as one of her people first, and as head of the Crown second. That sequence mattered to her. It had always mattered to her. In the weeks and months that followed, the questions raised in that interview did not disappear. The racism allegation was investigated internally. Findings never made public. The rift deepened rather than eased. Conversations that should have happened privately either didn't, or happened too late. The wounds documented so publicly in that sitting room with Oprah were not healed by a 12-word statement, however carefully crafted, but the detail that Low preserved, the detail that could so easily have been lost in the larger noise of the statement and its fallout, is the simplest and in many ways the most important one. She waited. She watched it with her people. On the same channel, at the same time, through the same screen that 12 million ordinary British households were watching through on a Monday evening in March. She made no speech about it. She told no one she was doing it as a gesture. It was simply what she decided. Privately, without announcement, without expectation of credit. That is who she was. Not above the moment, inside it. And Valentine Low made sure we wouldn't forget it. If what draws you here is the kind of access that goes beyond the headlines, the private decisions, the moments behind closed doors, the things that only surface years later in carefully sourced books like Courtiers, then subscribe to Royal Archives. There is far more still to uncover about this family, and some of the most significant moments in this monarchy's recent history have barely been touched yet.